Hi, ladies, and welcome back to our time together with Connect the Dots. I'm so excited to be back with you and to have a good friend of mine, Maxine, with us today. We met a little bit ago, right? Just
Yeah,
like through social media. How crazy is that?
it's crazy, but we just clicked immediately. So it was like kind of talking to someone I'd known my whole life.
Exactly. It felt exactly like that. And what I love is God's intentionality to bring his daughters together for support, for encouragement, for love, and to realize we're not alone on this journey, that there are millions of women out there who are on the same journey of proclaiming the name of Jesus, who's allowing people into our hurt and our shame and our pain and what God has done through it and into our God story so that others may be inspired to reach out for their healing and also a closer relationship with God. So you have an incredible ministry. Tell us about it.
Yeah. So first of all, I just want to say thank you for having me here. I'm so excited to connect with you and the people who might be watching and listening. Yeah, I actually have two organizations that are just my heart, really. And one of them is Strong Women of God, which Nichole, you were on not too long ago. I think it was actually last week
Yeah, it
or a
was
couple
awesome.
weeks ago. And we interviewed you there. And with Strong Women of God, it's just an incredible space for women to come and share their story. And what I really wanted it to be was a space that we could be encouraged, that we could highlight women who are occupying wherever their street is. And so whether you are, a stay-at-home mom, or whether you are a boss lady CEO, an author, a speaker, a poet, but really women who are starting off, maybe taking that big leap and sort of giving them a platform to share maybe their story for the first time or with a new audience for the first time anyway.
Yeah,
Um,
I love what you said, highlighting women and their story and their journey. And so often we come through stuff and God brings us through stuff and we know we have the story and we listen to everybody else's God's story. And we're like, I want that opportunity. I want to be able to share what God's done for me, but we're not sure where the opportunity is. Like, or what platform? How do I do this? So highlighting other women is so amazing. I love to do the exact same thing. I've never put it that way. So I'm glad you put it into words for me, but that's incredible. So that's one ministry you have. You have a secondary ministry as well, right?
Yeah, so that one is Bravely Rise. And really both of these organizations have sort of a heartbeat, a similar heartbeat, which is giving voice to people who have felt like their voice didn't matter before.
Mm.
And so with Bravely Rise, what we do is we bring women in small groups, so groups of about 12, on retreats throughout the year. And it's really geared towards women who have faced some kind of difficulty in their life. For many, it is trauma, but for others, it could just be something that they can't quite get over. And the mission there is to help them, you replace the lies of the enemy that have been spoken over them and replace it with, God's truth in their life. And the way that we do that is through stories, right? Stories are so powerful. We see that Jesus uses stories all throughout the Bible to really make an impact. And so we encourage women to write down their story. And so the women go through a process of writing their own story over the course of several sessions, but they're also hearing other women's stories. So it gives them the courage to speak up. And so we've seen just incredible transformation from women who are taking that first step and a stand and saying, no, my story doesn't define me. It is part of me, but it doesn't define me. And God's truth defines me. So it's just been incredible to lead those two organizations over the last few years, really.
Oh my gosh, that's so amazing. You are so right about writing out your story. And I think sometimes we have it jumbled in our mind a little bit, because it's our life. And once you start writing it out, you start to realize how far you've come
Yeah.
and who God has been in your life. But we had a guest on a couple of weeks ago. Her name is Virginia. And when we were finished recording, she said, I feel so free.
Yeah.
It was the first time she had told her God story in its entirety. And she said, I feel so free. And she started to cry. And then I started to cry. And it was incredible when you finally get it out. Like, you're no longer ashamed of it, but you really haven't told anybody about it,
Yeah.
because there is still some shame to it and afraid of what people think. And then you let it all out and you realize that was the only thing holding you back. So that's incredible what you get to do. And we'll put that link in under here so ladies can check that out and see what it's about. And I mean, you told us it's incredible. That's incredible and so needed today. But
Yeah.
it stems from your own story, your own God story, right?
Absolutely. I think, my story definitely is one of restoration, redemption, and healing. And one of the things for me is that I was so trapped in the things that happened to me.
Mm.
And I thought that I became defined by what happened, in so many aspects. And I really grew up believing several lies, several lies that were spoken over me. One from childhood, which was that I was unwanted. And it was such a lie, but it got stuck in my head at a very young age. And, a lot of my life decisions followed that thought pattern of being unwanted. And then, I share this pieces of this story in Bravely Rise, but in college, I was raped, and physically assaulted by someone, and I went to go get help, and I wasn't believed. And that really changed my entire life. Like, the incident itself was difficult. But, and I think you'll speak to a lot of people who face trauma, the aftermath was so difficult. And not being believed, not getting help, it really kind of short wired something in my brain. And I just changed. My whole makeup of who I was changed. And so I was living with a lot of pain. I was living with a lot of shame. I was living with a lot of anger. And my personality just became very volatile. And I thought that that's who I was. I went my whole life, from moving forward, oh, I'm just an angry person. This is who I am. I'm an angry person. And I would sort of mask that sometimes with social justice, and I'm going to use my anger in a good way. But really, really, I was just angry all the time. Yeah. And because I wasn't believed in that situation, because I wasn't helped in that situation, I buried it. I literally pushed it so far down that for a few years of my life, I wouldn't have even said it happened, right? I just kind of literally pushed it back in a physical sense. Yeah. But in an emotional sense and in a spiritual sense, oh my gosh, it was taking its toll on me and eating away. And I didn't have a relationship with God. I did grow up with a believing grandmother, but with an old school sort of mentality about God, the God of wrath, right? The God of fear. And it didn't appeal to me. And so when I was sort of looking out at the world and seeing these injustices, it really shut my heart out to God. There can't be a God, because if there was a God, these things wouldn't happen, right? Yes. And so what it did is it actually sent me down this crazy, crazy path of literal lost years, literally just losing my mind, not understanding the effects of sexual trauma at all. That a lot of the actions that I took that were very rash, that were very dangerous, could have put me in some bad situations, was my trauma acting out. And I just thought it was me. And because I wasn't believed that first time, I never really brought it up again. Not until I was much older and started kind of talking about it. So when I got saved, it was such a radical moment of God's love just pouring out on me and breaking through barriers that I didn't even know I had. I didn't even know I needed God when I got saved. I went to church because I had a stirring that I couldn't explain. No one invited me. No one said, hey, go here. I literally had this impression, go do this. And I felt, God lead me to a specific church. And that night, they did an altar call, and I didn't want to go up. I did not want to go up. They did 3 altar calls, and I sat there I'm not going up. I folded my arms nope. And the last altar call they did, I remember the pastor, he spoke, and this is a pretty large congregation. There were a ton of people up there already, but he said, we're waiting on one person, and we're not going to move from this moment until the person comes. And he was standing right over in my section. And you know, you have that sinking feeling like, oh my gosh, this is really happening. And I'm like, I don't even believe in this stuff. I was not a believer. Like, I did not believe. I was just sitting there because I had this bothered feeling of, you have to go. And I went up there, and the pastor saw me, and he was like, this is who we're praying for. And people just turned and they laid hands on me and they started praying, and I broke. And I don't even know what happened. I'll be honest. In that moment, I wasn't thinking Jesus. I wasn't thinking God. I just felt this sense just fall off of me. I felt like the literal, you know, when they say like your heart hardens, I felt it like whatever the ice was around it, just like somebody was chiseling at it. And it was just like this mush. And I sobbed for, I don't even know how long it was. But some of the words that the pastor spoke over me, because he began to speak prophetically over my life. And I didn't understand that either. I didn't get any of it. It was just mumbo jumbo to me. But one of the things that he said right at the beginning that caused me to start crying, that caused me to break down, was that there have been lies spoken over you.
Wow.
And that rang so true. It was like a truth that was deep in my soul, you know? And I was shaken. It was like, if I was dead, those were the words to like wake me up. There were lies spoken over you. And I think really that's the heart behind Bravely Rise. And interestingly, you know, later on in his kind of prophetic word, he also prayed that strong women of God would come and surround me, which was so far from my mind because I was living such an isolated existence. Yeah. It was just in such an isolated place. And my relationships with women at the time weren't the strongest. I had a couple of girlfriends that were really good and great, but they were far away. So everything he said was, I was just like, no, just complete denial, like whatever. I left church and I was like, well, I don't believe anything that just happened, but I can't explain it. And that bothered me. I'm a truth seeker at my core. So it totally bothered me that I couldn't explain what happened to me. Why was I so emotional? Why was I breaking down? And so I began to just go back to church by myself. I didn't tell anybody really, except for my mom. I told my mom, and I sobbed with my mom for 2 hours. And I remember crying in the car and telling her, I don't know what happened. I can't tell you that I believe in God because I don't, but something happened to me. And I had to keep going. So I kept going by myself for a couple months, and it finally all clicked. And it was like the veil dropped from my eyes, like legit. And I was able to see for the first time Jesus. I was able to see the way he saw me for the first time. And my life radically changed. And immediately after that point, that was about 2 months later, after that point that I fully gave my life, like I'm all in, I'm doing everything. God began to lift up these memories of what had happened to me in college. And it was so sudden. It came like out of nowhere. And I was triggered by, I was watching a TV show and they showed a rape scene and I was triggered. No, mind you, I used to watch Game of Thrones. I used to watch all of these crazy, violent things before I got saved. Never bothered me, never like clicked, nothing. And all of a sudden, here I am on my living room floor by myself, sobbing. I had to turn off the episode. I couldn't even finish. And I'm like, what's going on? And that was really the first stage of God saying, hey, I'm going to heal you from this, but I need you to acknowledge it again. I need you to trust that I will be there for you and that I will walk you through this. And so I started digging it up and I started doing work. I started reading books on trauma. I wasn't ready to go talk to anybody yet about it because I still didn't think anybody was going to believe me. And I was ashamed. And it took many years for me to be comfortable enough to say, hey, this thing happened and it doesn't define me. And so even before Rise, God kind of kept working like little pieces out of me. And the first was really telling my story. And so I told what happened in that situation and how God sort of redeemed and began this healing process for the first time. And at a talk at a women's college. And what I realized after I finished telling my story was that there were so many women who came up to me afterwards, like 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds saying, me too. This is my story too.
Mm-hmm.
And it dawned on me that there are so many women sitting here having dealt with trauma, having dealt with sexual trauma, physical trauma, abuse, things that they're not even sure if they can call abuse, right? What
Right.
happens when I'm a little kid and my little cousin touched me?
Mm-hmm.
They're not necessarily thinking that these things are affecting them, but they do. Everything affects you. And I realized the story after story after story of all of these women that had had this experience and are living with it. And they are living out life like their identity is their trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And it just dawned on me like, no, this has to go. We can't have this anymore. And really laid the work for Bravely Rise of like, no, we're going to create a space where it's safe for women to come and to be believed and to tell their story, whether it is about sexual abuse or physical trauma or sometimes divorce. Sometimes there is pain from families that are unresolved, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that's the work that that we do at Bravely Rise, just give women a space. It's not a therapy space in the sense of no one is sitting there saying, hey, here's your next step. This is really a handshake. It's for the person who's maybe not ready to go to therapy yet, but needs a place to test out talking about certain things in a safe space. And then their next step maybe is therapy after that, you know? And I've seen incredible things. There have been women who left Bravely Rise and started their own ministries afterwards. There have been women who have said, hey, I'm going to go press charges now. I feel empowered. I feel ready. There have been women who have done what I did, what God called me to do with my situation, which was after years later. Remember, this happened when I was 18. God put it in my heart to go find this man and like physically reach out to him and forgive him.
Wow.
Offer my forgiveness. And it just seems so bizarre. Like, what? And you know what happened? And I don't think that this is what everybody is supposed to do. It's just what God asked me to do. When I did get in contact with him, when I did reach him, before I could say anything, he started crying. Like he knew. And he was so gracious and he apologized before I could get any of my words out. And I was ready. Oh, I had my script. I was like, okay, you know? And he was just like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. He's like, I think about that all the time. And I've been carrying it my whole life and blah, blah, blah.
Wow.
And I got an opportunity to say, hey, I forgive you. I forgive you because Jesus forgave me and because Jesus is asking me to forgive you. So I forgive you. And I don't know if he was saved. I don't know if he's a believer. I don't know. But I left that call because it was a phone call and I felt so free. I felt such this like burden that just got released. And it was a next chapter, you know? And again, everybody's healing looks different. And, you know, one of the big things that I stressed really with Bravely Rise is like, healing is never done.
Mm-hmm.
It's a constant thing. And so there are going to be moments where you feel like you took 3 steps back, you know, but that doesn't mean that you haven't actually moved forward. It's our perception of that we're moving back, where God knows exactly what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, that's a bit of my story. And with Strong Women of God, it's the same. I'm realizing that there are just stories trapped within women, people who believe that they're not, that their story is not important, that
Yes.
you're not worthy enough to reach people, to be an influencer. But the reality is that if God has called you, it's because he's going to work through you. And that's it, right? That's
Yes.
really it. That's the end of it. And everything else is us making too big of a deal of who we are and too little of a deal of who he is. That's it.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Oh my gosh, I love that. I think you need to say that one more time just in case somebody had to stop and tell a child to sit down or got distracted. You need to say that one more time.
Yeah, I'm just saying everything else, you know, everything else that kind of puts the distraction for us is us making too big of a deal of who we are and too little of a deal of who God is. And we
That's
just have to keep that kind of going. You know, God is going to work through us. He's called us. He's called you. You're listening to this right now. He has called you. That's a big deal. Like God, like the creator of the universe, he thought so much of you that he called you by name. Like,
Oh
How are you not moved? How are you not transformed by that? How do you not let go of, those things that you feel like you're not worthy of? You
Mm.
know,
Mm.
we're saying that when we think that, when we believe that, it's kind of a reflection on God. Like we're saying, well, God, you're wrong about me. And
Mm.
God's not wrong about you. God called you, you heard his voice, he's got a plan for you. And so really that's what we try to do with both Bravely Rise and Strong Women of God, encourage women to use their voice. And it's a reminder for me, honestly. I don't talk about anything that I haven't struggled with or continue to struggle with. I have to continue to remind myself, hey, I am called. God has a plan for me. He's working through me. Because there are moments that get discouraging. There are moments still of fear. There's moments still of insecurity. There's moments of like, oh, God, I'm not equipped for this next thing. And that's real. Like, those are real things, but I do have to take a step back every single time and say, wow, this really isn't about me.
Mm. Yep.
It's really, really about him and how can I continue to work out. And so everything that I do, from serving, from these organizations, just helping women, helping people, everything, is out of a space of gratitude. Honestly, it is. There's no obligation. There's no, I have to go to church. There's no, I have to read my Bible. It's just this gratitude because my goodness, I did not deserve this. The life that I led, in the wake of my trauma, I left destruction in my path, and I did not deserve this. I did not deserve this mercy. I did not deserve this kindness. But it's not about what we deserve. Isn't that incredible? It's not about what we deserve. It is just about how good God is. It is just about his goodness, his love, his gift, his mercy. It has so little to do with our own actions. And
Yes.
I think that thought is just so freeing,
Yes.
Yeah.
It is completely free. And you said something earlier. You said, I didn't know God as you're standing in that church. And the first thought that popped in my head is, but he knew you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and your story is of God's pursuing you, saying, come to me, come to me, come to me. And then sitting there and there's that altar call and there's one and then there's two. And God's like, I'm waiting for you. This is for you. I'm waiting for you. And that is just so incredible. And I think God does that so often in our lives. He pursues us and then he's like, I'm waiting for you. I'm waiting for you. And we dig in and we resist because we don't know what's on the other side of it. Or like you, it's like, I don't have a problem. I'm just me living my life.
Yeah. And
And
can
so
I
it is God.
Yeah, absolutely. And can I also just say, it's funny because that desire, it's so crazy. So I was always wanting, right, in my mind anyway,
Mm.
to receive this kind of pursuit by
Mm.
a man, right? So I didn't grow up with my knowing my father, my biological father. So I grew up with that big absence. And I think what it did, like many women I know that are in this situation experience something similar, which is like it creates this void, right? This lack that you're constantly looking for someone to affirm you, a male to affirm you.
Yeah.
And I was always disappointed in those relationships. I was always, everything is coming up short,
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even know how desperately I was seeking what God was providing, that pursuit, and I look back at it and it's funny because one of the things that I said always before I was saved was like, I did so much for people and nobody really did anything for me, right? Like I'm always out reaching out, doing this thing left, right, going everywhere for people. Nobody will come for me. No one is looking for me. No one's chasing after me. No one wants me, with that kind of mentality and sort of always wanting someone to do a grand gesture. I don't, where this idea came from, I don't know, but I was like, in the hearts, like my deepest desire in my heart, deep down, I wanted someone to come through with this grand gesture of love. And here I was all these years later, sitting in this church that I felt like literally, what am I doing here? I remember I came in and they were worshiping and I felt irritated by what they were singing. Like I just wanted it to end, right? And there in that moment with such a bad attitude that I walked in, God like came for me in such dramatic way. You know, I think about it like this is like a whole church turned to pray for me. They put it on the like jumbo screen or whatever it is, you know, and I was horrified at the time because I'm like, oh my gosh, like I don't even want people to know I'm church. What if this gets out? Like, you know, I was a very big like no to church, like, you know, but here looking back at it, like what a grand gesture.
Yes. Yes.
Right? What
Yes.
a grand gesture that he gave me and that he pursued me through the mud, like really through the mud. And in those moments, like you mentioned before, like even though I thought that that I didn't know him, really, I didn't have a relationship with him, he was always there, always looking after me, always protecting me. And I know that is hard to hear because again, when people go through trauma, they're like, well, where was God in my trauma?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the reality is that
Mm-hmm.
sin is real
Mm-hmm.
and sin exists and it's not God's plan and it's not God's heart.
Mm-hmm.
And things happen sometimes. And he doesn't promise that bad things aren't going to come, but he promises that that he will bring good through it. You
Right.
know? And
Right.
that's where I felt God. I felt God in the fact that I am still here. I worked through depression and through suicidal thoughts and through just destruction, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and he was there. And he worked with me the way that I needed to work with him. If somebody would have come to me like when I was at the bottom there and said, "Hey, just come to church," I would have been like, "No, no,
Yeah.
100%, get out of my face. Don't talk to me. You don't know what you're talking about." And so that's not the way he did it with me. He knows how to pursue people. And I want to encourage people that you might still be praying for somebody in your life who hasn't come and they seem so far off. Continue to pray. And just remember that God doesn't save people the same way. He can break through anything. At that space and time, I was into like all the Eastern stuff. I was into meditation and yoga and crystals. I used to read tarot cards. I used to like not go to tarot, like I did it for people. You understand?
Wow.
I was in a completely different world, but God needed to use that to open up my mind because before I got into that space, I didn't even believe that there was a spirit world.
Mm.
So somebody coming in to me, talking to me about God, I would have been like, nope. But
Right.
because he brought me through that, which is not of God,
Right.
100% not of God, but he was still able to use it to open up my mind to say, hey, there has to be something outside of you. You're
Mm-hmm.
wrong,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm. It's because God uses all things
Everything,
for our
everything.
good in his glory. So he will use all the sin, he'll use all the hurt and all the brokenness and trauma and everything else in our lives to
Absolutely.
bring us to him. He's like,
Yeah.
okay, you got off path right here, but I'm going to use that now.
Yeah.
And that's the way he works. He's always countering the enemy's moves, always countering those moves.
Yeah.
I love what you said about sin. You know, I get asked that all the time. How can God let this happen? And we put all the fault of sin on God.
Right.
I mean, think about that for a minute. Sinless, perfect, creator of our world, creator of us, who knows no sin. We put the sin of this world, the enemy, ourselves on God and say, how did you let this happen? Making him accountable for the sin he did not commit.
Yeah.
And he tells us that there will be sin, there will be trials, there will be tribulation, there will be a ton that happens in this world, but he has overcome it.
Yeah.
And I think allowing him to overcome it in our lives, and that's coming in and coming over us and then coming into our pain. That's the way I see overcoming in my mind, because it's like, overcome it. What does that even mean? And I see that he just comes in, he covers us, and then he comes into our hurt and our pain. And that's how he overcomes in our lives.
Yeah.
My goodness, Maxine, thank you so much for sharing your heart. I mean, I should have been taking notes. I feel like I should have been taking notes because that was just so powerful and so amazing how God worked in your life. And we know that God, he is our friend. He's for us. And so he tailor makes the relationship for us, and he draws us in a way that he knows we'll respond to. He's not a cookie cutter God. And so he tailors that relationship with us, and he draws us how he knows we're going to respond to, what he knows we're going to respond to. And he did that in your life. And I know I am so grateful that he did this, that I'm able to be encouraged by you and to hear your story and be encouraged by what God can do and does do. I love that he rolled out the red carpet for you. I love that he put you on the kiss cam. I love that he's like, I am going to grand gesture the heck out of this girl.
Yeah.
I'm going to show my love for her. Guys, he can do the same for you if you let him. And he probably already has been. And you may just be not wanting to see it, not wanting to accept it. It's just, you're just digging in your heels. But I tell you, open up your heart to God. Pray right now, God, if I've been missing it, open my eyes. God, if my heart is hard to you, soften my heart. Show me where I can allow you into it. Show me where you've been trying it and I've been denying you. God, come into my heart. Fix, heal, restore, renew, rebuild. God, I give my life to you. Guys, I love you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Maxine, thank you again for joining us. We will have all her information where you can find her, where you can look into some of the things she's talked about with Bravely Rise and Women of God. And so you can reach out to her. Maxine, you okay with that? Ladies,
Yes, please do. Say hi, subscribe, follow, all of the stuff. I love connecting with women. And hey, maybe you have an incredible story that you think I should hear. Reach out to me.
That's right. That's right. Reach out, start writing that story. Anytime that we have ladies in our She Connects group, the first thing they have to do is write their story.
Wow.
And it's not a homework assignment, and it's not to give them extra work or to save time for myself or any of that. It's so that they can write out what God's done for them, really see it in writing, pour out their hearts in these words. And normally I get like the third draft because they write their first draft. I'm like, oh my goodness, I get like third draft. And so many times lady tells me I cried through the entire thing, or I kind of struggled again, or it brought up new stuff. And in that, God uses all that to heal. God uses all of that to refine. God uses all of that to show how much he's done for us. So absolutely reach out to Maxine, write your story down, and see what God has done. Remember, to me, it's like a walk down memory lane when we do that. It's a walk down memory lane of what God has done and what he's continuing to do. I love you guys. We'll meet right back here on Monday for Connect with God and our scripture for the week. I hope to see you there. Don't forget to invite your friends and family to this. It is so important that we do that. We know that we can go into all the world and preach the good news of Jesus by clicking share or clicking invite. We no longer have to leave our homes, our couch, or our phone. We no longer have to actually go out into all the world to spread the good news of Jesus. We can hit the invite or share. So do that today, and we will see you guys on Monday for Connect with God. Love you guys. Have a good day.
Bye.